Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 721, for the 31st of July, 2022. Richard Saunders coming to you from, what a change, sunny, cool, but sunny Sydney, Australia. On this week's show, we're going to kick off with a longer tribute, a proper tribute, I hope, to my friend Jim Wilshire, who passed away, sadly, a couple of weeks ago. Now, Jim was certainly an inspiration for me over the years. I was always a fan of Jim Wilshire. Even when we became good friends, I was still a fan of his work. And his advice and his example meant a lot to me over the years when it comes to things like, well, presenting on radio and podcasts. Find out more about my wonderful friend Jim Wilshire, and we'll also hear Jim reading one of his skeptical poems he wrote especially for a water divining test. Following that, it's the latest from Australian Skeptics News, written by Tim Mendham and read by Adrian Hill in Canada. And then we catch up with that goose Maynard. Maynard was in town recently. I swung by the suburb of Glebe to the Madame Frou Frou Cafe, where he and I used to, well, quite regularly meet up in the before times, before the pandemic. We have a coffee and we find out what Maynard's up to, including his own podcast where he just recently interviewed that great British pop star, Mari Wilson. Then to round off the show, it's back to the Trove Archives and we find out about pyramid power. Oh boy, pyramid power. How powerful were pyramids? How powerful are pyramids? In the 1970s and the 1980s, people were sitting under pyramids, meditating under pyramids, putting razor blades under pyramids and doing all sorts of things under pyramids. Before we start, a little note from me to say, those of you listening in Australia, if you tune into ABC TV, News Breakfast, 7:45 a.m. on Monday, that's Monday the 1st of August, you should see me. A little segment with me. That's going to be recorded live, so fingers crossed, as we skeptics love to say, fingers crossed. Also a big shout out to those people, especially in Australia, but around the world, who have decided to get their fourth shot, or their second booster. How does it work? I'm not sure. I had 2 vaccinations, and then they said I needed a booster, which I had, so it's number 3, and recently I had number 4, and my side effects, I felt quite fine, except for a sore arm. I don't remember having such a sore arm in the past from a vaccination. It was sore for a few days. So all you people out there who have had a bit of a sore arm, well done. Well done, because a sore arm is a small price to pay for that extra little bit of immunization. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, and I think I might fire up the barbecue. Why not? Why don't I have a barbecue? It might last just about as long as the Skeptic Zone this week. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Now, as we've been telling you over the last few weeks, we are very sad to hear of the passing of Jim Wilshire. Jim Wilshire, the Skeptic Zone voice-over man, and he did many of the introductions for reporters over the years. But more importantly, for me, he was a huge influence. I first met Jim in 1985 when I was just a teenager, and Jim had a radio show on midnight to dawn, weekends here in Sydney. And I was getting over a very traumatic experience I had in finishing high school. And so I would often stay up all night. And Jim's late night comedy show, which went for hours with interviews and sketches and funny bits and competitions, was just something I really needed. It took my mind off things. Anyway, I grew to love the show. It was called Nightclub, Jim Wilshire's Nightclub, and I wrote in a funny letter because I thought this guy is sort of my sense of humor. And it was a crazy story about fleas being hijacked and all sorts of things. But I was amazed when I tuned into the next episode to hear Jim talk about my letter at the top of the show and then read it out towards the end of the show. I couldn't believe it. And he sent me a really nice book about motor racing, F1, Formula One motor racing, together with a letter from his producer. So you can imagine I was over the moon. Some weeks go by, I finally get to meet Jim in the studio when just before he left Sydney to go and work in Canberra radio. And we sort of stayed in touch over the years. And I would often visit Jim when he moved to the Albury-Wodonga area to take up a radio position there. In fact, I helped him move. We rented a huge van and I helped him move all his furniture down there. So we did keep in touch over the years, and I spent many a happy day on Jim's in Jim's little farmhouse down in the rolling hills of the Murray River, where we would watch funny movies and have adventures, and ended up working a lot together. We shot a DVD of Jim's poetry one time about 15 or 16 years ago. And that was just a wonderful experience. We shot and then I edited all that and authored the DVD. Jim was also known for a movie role he did in a movie called Strange Bedfellows with Paul Hogan. And if you've seen the movie Strange Bedfellows, there's a scene in a country hall where there's a dance and Jim plays the band leader. And he said that was a wonderful experience. Jim, in 1996, also became Australia's gurning champion or face-pulling champion on a TV show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. And Jim, for years, liked to say he was still Australia's reigning face-pulling champion because they never had another one. Jim also, and probably why he sent me a book on Formula One racing as a prize, Jim loved cars. He wasn't a petrol head. He wasn't somebody who would get into a car and just rev it up. And he appreciated cars. He appreciated engineering and he appreciated good driving. It was one of his passions in life. Jim and I also worked together on the Mighty Mittamuster water divining documentary. After I'd filmed the documentary and put it together into a rough edit, I travelled back down to the Albury-Wodonga area to visit Jim, and we spent a few days writing the script. Then later on, Jim came to Sydney. We had the use of a radio studio, and Jim did the voiceover work for that, as well as recording some poetry along the way. And in a moment, I'll play you one of the poems Jim recorded that day, a poem all about water divining tests. I had the pleasure of appearing with Jim Lusher on Melbourne radio in about 1989. I had a new origami book out at the time, and Jim, being a friend, invited me onto his Drive radio show, which was a very high-profile radio show on the 3AW station in Melbourne. And Jim, at that stage, had invented a game for call-in listeners to play on the radio. He called it Addiction, and it was a fascinating way of people being able to try and get through a maze on radio. And Jim showed me how that worked behind the scenes, and that was just fascinating. It's a great pity, and it's something that I regret very much, is that in the last couple of years I didn't see Jim, largely because of COVID. Jim, when COVID hit, we couldn't travel anyway. I certainly couldn't travel out of Sydney down to see Jim in the Albury-Wodonga area, which is about a 6-hour drive. And then as things sort of went up and down with COVID, I spoke to Jim on the phone, and he was quite happy not to have visitors at that time because he was worried about COVID. So yet another pity, another tragedy, I guess you could say, concerning COVID. And I know it's disrupted many lives around the world. Jim Lusher was a genuinely nice guy. He treated people with respect, and he took his craft very seriously, but had a lot of fun along the way. And for you budding podcasters out there, one of the best bits of advice Jim gave me, amongst many bits of advice, was when you're reading or you're presenting on radio or podcasts. He said, read a script as if you're ad-libbing, and ad-lib as if you're reading a script. And the more you think about it, the more that makes sense. In other words, if you're reading something, don't make it dry and cold. Put some character into it as if you're not reading it. But if you're ad-libbing something off the cuff, then try and make it flow as if you're following some sort of idea or script. There's so much more to Jim than what I've covered here. And needless to say, personally, I will miss Jim very much. But now here is Jim, the raw recording of Jim reading his poem, written especially for the documentary on water divining, called Diviner's Intervention.
Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Take 2. The gang turned up armed with wire and wood to locate the water wherever they could by reading vibrations that come from the ground, which show where the water was sure to be found. They came to win money at the Dowsers Convention with prayers of hope for divine intervention to help them to sense the old H2O. Then one by one, they all had a go. Chance predicted the success they would face as they searched for the water all over the place, at the muster in the hills up Mitta way, and with the loot on the line, they were ready to play. Walking in a circle or in a crisscross line, with the weight of belief in the autumn sunshine, making sweat on their brows as they tried to tell which was just sand and where was the well. Then the sun went down on the muster at Mitta, and the sweet taste of victory had turned a bit bitter, for the dowsers and diviners had failed to find water. Maybe their rods should have been longer or shorter. The contestants blamed static and streams and fences that disturbed the waves and twiddled their senses, but the skeptics went home with their booty intact, because none could prove that dowsing's a fact.
Got it.
Felt good.
Beauty.
Righto.
Sounds bloody good. Sounds bloody good. Let's have a fiddle. Front section, I think. Shh. You should be in the radio game, Jim.
So long, Jim, and thanks for everything.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Canada, here to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics newsletter. This is newsletter number 153. You can subscribe to this newsletter and get it delivered to your inbox every other week, complete with links to all the stories. Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. But now let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. If anyone needed to see evolution in action, you need only look at the development of COVID variants. What would take millions of years in vertebrate life forms takes only weeks in the viral world. New variants tried and failed, and some being successful in current circumstances, with new ones waiting in the wings. It makes you realize what a hard job it is keeping only a few steps behind with vaccination development. Tell that to your crazy uncle who keeps saying, quote, "See, vaccines don't work," end quote. And on that happy note, read on. Okay, Tim, we'll do just that. The science of placebos is fueling quackery. This discusses the benefits and dangers of placebos and how they can be used to substitute for science and research. Quote, "Education, communication, and honesty are the best friends of medical practice. Patients and healthcare professionals deserve to know what placebos can and cannot do," end quote. Why do smart people join cults? This is a lengthy piece that looks at how people you think would not get wrapped up in a cult do, in fact, get wrapped up in a cult. What are the nature and motivations of cults? What drives members to often put up with mental and physical abuse, and how do they get out? And of course, it shows that no one, regardless of education or smartness, is immune from silliness. Scientists who have been misquoted by ghost hunters. This article looks at the paranormal fraternity's propensity to use incorrect or incomplete quotes and sciencey sounding terms, from Edison, Tesla, and Einstein twice to substantiate their worldviews. A refreshing discussion from what is basically a pro-paranormal site. The June issue of The Skeptic magazine is now out with a special feature on pseudoscience riding on the coattails of genuine science, and I finally got mine. Takes a while to get to Canada. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. Contact the editor if you're not sure if your existing subscription needs renewing. To subscribe to The Skeptic, go to our shop to sign up for a hard copy or digital edition, or both like I do. The digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. Learn more about our magazine and subscribe now. Skeptics in Action. If you have any ideas for stories or want to contribute to Skeptics communications, such as the magazine or Facebook page, or just have something you want to get off your chest, then you're welcome to get in touch. New leads should be sent to newstips@skeptics.com.au. Items of interest. Travel tips with, my favorite, ghosts. 10 best places to spot ghosts in Miami. Not exactly the city you first think of as a ghost hub, and perhaps understandably, as some of the places listed don't actually have ghosts. But there are a number of cemeteries, some of which aren't haunted, and some very large buildings which might make finding ghosts a tad difficult. This is really just a plug for ghost tours, so it's handy from that point of view. Now for 15 haunted places in India. There are forts, temples, hotels, and even a film studio complex. 9 of the most haunted places around the world. And for the people who want to go the whole hog on their world discovery tour, here's a swag of the usual culprits and some novelties from a range of countries, though South Africa is the only Southern Hemisphere location. Surprisingly, neither of the hotels involved with the book and the filming of The Shining are included, despite there being perennials in these types of lists. More ghosts. The 25 greatest ghost films. At last, a list made by someone older than 15. Films here stretch back to the early 1950s and makes a pretty decent list of choosing some classics, albeit still concentrating on scares rather than charm. Anyone for the Canterville Ghost? Nonetheless, this is better than most such lists, which seem to think cinema started in the early 2000s. Now, on to some alien news. Quote, I was forced to dissect an alien, end quote, says nurse. This is a story about a funeral director from Roswell who was asked to build child-sized coffins, presumably for aliens. It also discusses an Army nurse's story told to the funeral director about being forced to dissect aliens and how she was so traumatized by the event that she resigned. And that's it for the nurse's story. No details, no description, no name, nothing. In fact, not much detail of anything, especially considering it was from someone who is apparently so persuasive that a detective said, quote, I sat down with him and I would say that in about 30 or 40 minutes, all the doubts I had about the reality of Roswell were gone, end quote. And now for an interesting follow-up about those psychic animals and the UK leadership. In the last newsletter, we mentioned a psychic seal and a human psychic who consults asparagus, who named the next leader of the Tory party in the UK. They both picked Ben Wallace. And guess what? They were both wrong. He didn't even make the first cut. Moral of the story, don't trust seals or asparagus. That's all for now. There is much more in the newsletter to read when you subscribe. But for now, this is Adrian Hill signing off from Canada, the land of curious currency, including the loonie and the toonie.
Hi, this is Brian Dunning. As part of National Science Week in Australia, Canberra Skeptics will be hosting a free screening of my latest documentary, Science Friction. This will be on Sunday, the 14th of August at 1 p.m. at King O'Malley's Pub, 131 City Walk in Canberra. So what is it all about? Well, you know those TV documentaries you see and the science experts they feature? Did you know that producers often edit them out of context and twist their words to make it seem like they promoted some pop sensationalism instead of the real facts? Science Friction exposes this practice and gives the scientists a chance to clear the record. You will be shocked to see how the media can twist their words and intent. That's Sunday, the 14th of August at 1 p.m. at King O'Malley's Pub. For further information about this free event, please visit canberraskeptics.org. Thank you, and I hope you all raise a glass to help promote science and truth-telling in the media. I know I certainly will. And please enjoy the film.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
We're back at the Madame Frou Cafe here in Glebe. This is where you and I used to meet Maynard regularly to discuss skeptical matters. And
that's right, it was a regular hoo-ha going on here. So often Bunga Bunga was recorded here a couple of times, and Tim still comes here from time to time. We just haven't got together due to the pandemic.
Which is still lingering.
Oh, it's still lingering on, indeed. In fact, I'm very concerned about the whole monkeypox thing at the moment.
Monkeypox?
Now that the CDC has called it, this could actually get some traction, because you see, a lot of people think, COVID, I won't get that, but if you get monkeypox, you can't get on Instagram, and there's no filter that can get around to monkeypox. So people might actually take notice at this. I think it's possible that people might take more notice, that even though it's a lot less chance of getting it.
Well, I'm quite shocked, Maynard, when I go on the buses and the trains here in Sydney, how many people forgot their mask.
And there's a monkey driving. That's the really puzzling thing. I'm thinking, sure, he might not get COVID, but,
we are taking it seriously.
I mean, look, like I said, I've been isolating myself for the last 2 years, and I have no intention of stopping, except to go out for a gig on the 20th of August, in which I'll probably get COVID.
What are you doing?
I'm doing a gig with the All-Nighters, the Australian ska legends, the All-Nighters, and two great supports with them at Mary's Underground in Sydney, which is the old basement, if anyone's ever been there.
The basement down near Circular Quay. Yes.
It's a crowded little one, and I will be wearing a mask as much as possible. I'll be doing a bit of DJing. I think I'll be playing some Porkers, another great Australian band. I'll be playing a bit of them on the night as I'm DJing. But yeah, that's that there. 20th of August. Come on down, people. Say hello. Take a risk at being in public.
So that's information is at maynard.com.au.
It's there, or you could just look at the All Nighters site as well. That's All Nighters, ALLNITERS, because Australians can't spell.
Maynard, I could not help but notice your
But I'm
T-shirt. You're broke, but your T-shirt.
Well, yes, I thought I'd get out and show my Skeptic Pride. In fact, I'm going to the Skeptical Pride March later. I'll be dancing in quite small shorts
and the lab coat
on a float with a cut-off lab coat.
Lab
It's
coat.
a crop top.
But folks, Maynard is wearing Skeptoid Media.
That's right, and that's the T-shirt I'll proudly have on. I'll say it loud, say it proud. I'm one with Brian Dunning and his Skeptoid Media, whatever they're on about. Although, apparently the East Coast of America resembles the face of Jimmy Durante or something like that. And he was making that case, and I've got no idea what that was about.
Well, he does try, doesn't he?
Look, I think sometimes he wakes up, he dreams something, and he wakes up and thinks it's real. I think that's the problem with Dunning. All right, thank you for the T-shirt, and send me another one. Remember, it's a medium, Brian.
Well, now, what have you been up to lately with in regards to your own podcast?
Well, I've been doing a few things that may be of interest to the skeptical listener. One of them being the history of the fashion label Wheels and Doll Baby. And you're thinking, oh, what's so skeptical about that? Well, they ran, Mel ran that label in Perth and in Adelaide and in Sydney from 87 to 2017, and then they sort of went away after 30 years, but then she's decided to come back and just do it as an online store and do some pop-ups. But she talks about the history of pop and music, how it interrelates with the fashion, and it's quite interesting. And also, what is the best way to solve the problem of people multiply ram-raiding your shop and stealing all your leather jackets on a regular occasion? Hers was a canine-related one, which may be of use to some sceptical listeners out there that are having problems of people playing with their test tubes.
Yes, it was a good interview, yes. And this is all at maynard.com.au.
Yeah, that's right. And the one that's coming out fairly shortly and might be out as you are listening to this, sceptical listener, is I've done an interview with someone not as well known in Australia as they should be, English, legendary singer in my book, Mary Wilson, who had the hit Just What I Always Wanted and just had some real pure pop going on there in the 80s. Really fun pop, dramatic, camp. It was great. And Mary Wilson, so I've had a chat with her. It's going to be about a 50-minute interview. It's got everything in there. And she even revealed, would have been a surprise to me, that she had gone out with Kevin Rowland, lead singer of Dexys Midnight Runners, of course you would know him from, and he's just re-released his album Tour-IA, which had Come On Eileen on it, but he's released it and remixed it the way he wanted it to be originally, and the record company wouldn't let him. So that's kind of interesting. So I found out a few things about Mary, and we had a good chat about all sorts of things, and I even relayed questions from the listeners to her, which floored her, and I drew a few connections between her music in the early 80s and the rave culture of the 90s that she'd never heard anyone ask her about before, which means I'm either completely wrong or no one had really been stupid enough to ask her that.
One or the other. One or the other. As we sit here on the side of the street here, sipping our... What have we got? Some coffees
Just
here.
Some coffee, yep. And there's some pigeons hopefully hanging around and the occasional dog wanting something.
And the occasional bus there goes the occasional dog now. I can just see it walking down the street.
But there goes the bus. That's
the bus.
the 321, is it? Yeah, I think it's L321. And here comes a 431
there
going past.
It's all happening here, folks.
Two of the great bus lines. This is the kind of noise that they complained about on Who Are These Podcasts when they reviewed Bunga Bunga.
Oh, yes.
They want to know why you're recording a podcast in a cafe with buses driving past.
Well, a lot of people thought that it was fake.
Yes.
You were recording in a studio and then just putting on...
I can assure you, if I was faking it, it'd be much better.
Listeners, we are here right on the side of the street with buses and everything going. And Maynard's just got some toast delivered to his table.
That's right. And look, there's Elon Musk going by. Hello, Maynard. Oh, he's gone.
He's gone.
I thought we got time to... No, he's got no time to mention Twitter. But it was nice of him to come through like that. So we don't fake anything on this show.
We don't fake anything. Maynard... good to catch up with you, folks. Go to maynard.com.au and listen to...
Mary Wilson,
yes.
Wheels and Doll Baby history, and
Bunga Bunga.
Of course with Tim Ferguson, and also there's a Bunga Bunga coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. There's a lot of stuff happening, and I'd like to say that possibly on New Year's Eve, because it's a tradition in Australia to play the Village People movie, Can't Stop the Music, we might have an actual video live stream watch-along. Now, I won't be able to screen the movie, but I'll pop on during the ad breaks and keep a camera of the TV. But basically, we can all watch and enjoy Can't Stop the Music together around the world at sometime on New Year's Eve, the Australian way. That's what I'm thinking about at the moment. Sure, it's a completely, it's an idea that will make me no money whatsoever, but that's the kind of guy I am, broke.
Nothing says Australia more than the village people on New Year's Eve, right?
Nothing says Maynard like broke. Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you could listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Now it's time once again to dive into those pages at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, chock-a-block, full to the brim, overflowing with digital archives going back decades and centuries. And this week we're going back very far indeed, in a sense. We're going to be looking at something that I certainly remember from, the 1970s, really, maybe the 1980s. Pyramid power. What is pyramid power? Well, let's have a look at Wiki. Pyramid power. Pseudoscientific belief that pyramids confer impossible powers. Pyramid power refers to the belief that the ancient Egyptian pyramids and objects of similar shape can confer a variety of benefits. Among these assumed properties are the ability to preserve foods, sharpen or maintain the sharpness of razor blades, improve health function as a thought form incubator, whatever that means, trigger sexual urges, and cause other effects. Such unverified conjectures regarding pyramids are collectively known as pyramidology. I certainly remember talk about sharpening razor blades and keeping food fresh like fruit stored under a pyramid would never go off. Apparently, people used to construct pyramid shapes and sleep under them. And here on the wiki page it says, in 2005, an episode of Mythbusters was aired on the Discovery Channel in which a basic test of pyramid power was performed using pyramids built to specifications found in pyramid power claims, reflecting the location of the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Several claims were tested concerning food rotting, a flower rotting, and a razor blade going dull. With control protocols in place, there was no significant difference between items in the pyramid and items outside. But let's go back to the 1970s when this was a thing. This really was a thing. It still is a thing, but more so in the 1970s. And we turn to the pages of the Canberra Times, dated the 4th of January 1979. Pyramid experiments. And there's no byline, so I guess this is written by a staff writer at the time. The popular enthusiasm for psychic phenomena has awakened new interest in the strange power apparently possessed by pyramids. The strange power of pyramids was probably first suspected in modern times when archaeologists investigating the Great Pyramids in Egypt could find no logical explanation for the mummified animals which they found in tunnels deep within the structure. Now, one of the most common pyramid experiments is to dehydrate small pieces of meat by placing them under a pyramid. In the 1940s, a Czechoslovakian, Karol Durbel, I think that's pronounced, discovered that a pyramid would sharpen razor blades. He finally obtained a patent for his, quote, invention, end quote, and marketed it worldwide. As well as sharpening razor blades and dehydrating meat, pyramids are supposed to be able to stimulate plant growth, recharge batteries, improve television and radio reception, just like in ancient Egypt, stimulate the healing process of wounds, and remove tarnish from metal objects. Is there anything it can't do? Can a pyramid really do these things? It is easy enough to find out for yourself. Build a pyramid and conduct some experiments. Yeah, okay. Pyramids can be constructed with sheet sides or as an open framework without any noticeable difference in the effects. The dimensions are not very critical, but most are modelled after the Great Pyramid. All pyramids have a square base with triangular sides of equal length which meet at an apex. In the Great Pyramid, the length of the sides is about 5% shorter than the length of the base. And accompanying the item are little diagrams how to construct your cardboard pyramid, it would seem to me, and then place it over a little pot plant. So, to make a pyramid on a base of 20 centimeters, you would need 4 triangles with sides measuring 19 centimeters. Any material can be used to make your pyramid, but cardboard, there you go, is probably the easiest to handle. You can put it together with adhesive tape. For the pyramid to work properly, it must be correctly aligned with one side facing magnetic north. Use a compass. When you have your pyramid finished and aligned, you will probably want to see if it works. There is one method which has mixed results, but it is very simple and may produce results for you. Make a very light pendulum, perhaps from a ping-pong ball on a length of thread, and bring it slowly near the side of the pyramid or over the top. The pendulum is supposed to deflect when it contacts the pyramid's energy field. The power of the pyramid is supposedly projected down within the limits of the imaginary lines extended from the sides. It grows progressively weaker as it gets further away from the focal energy point, which is in the center of the pyramid, 1/3 from the distance from the base to the apex. Energy is also projected off the tip and the base corners. You can test the dehydrating effects of the pyramid with small pieces of meat or fruit. The process will take several days depending on the size of the object and the pyramid. Another experiment you could try would be to test the effect of a pyramid on plant growth. Plant seeds into pots under identical conditions, but put a pyramid over one of them. Do the plants under the pyramid germinate and grow faster? Pyramids are supposed to, quote, sweeten, end quote, the taste of tap water. Try it with 2 glasses of water. Put one under a pyramid overnight and compare the taste in the morning. What an interesting article, and almost a scientific protocol being suggested here, but of course they don't talk about double-blind testing. And somewhat similar is another report we find in the Australian Women's Weekly, dated the 19th of October 1977. Pyramid power. How to make it work for you. Yes, 1977. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. The strange force inside a pyramid can easily be harnessed for many domestic uses, claims scientist Norman Stark. Norman Stark. Well, before we progress, let's see if we can find any information about Norman Stark. And a return here says there's a book being published under the name Norman H. Stark, and a return from Amazon. The first practical pyramid book. Free energy for beauty, health, gardening, food dehydration, and meditation. Published on the 1st of January 1977. So this looks like the Australian Women's Weekly would have seen the press release or something from the publisher at the time. And if I look at the cover of the book, and this is on Amazon, it says Free Pyramid inside, Norman Stark, the first practical pyramid book. And the cover has a young lady sitting in the lotus position in a leotard under a pyramid with some flowers and plants and other things about her. Seems to be a minor collector's item because the paperback is $35, explains how to use the mysterious electrical energy forces existing within a pyramid for such purposes as dehydrating foods, chemically changing water, and sharpening razor blades. Includes instructions for building your own pyramid. But apart from that, I can find very little about Norman Stark himself. Nevertheless, we might read on with the article. Pyramids, properly constructed and positioned, are a source of unlimited energy which can be put to use in many different ways, from dehydrating food to meditating. Science has recognized that an unknown electrical energy exists inside a pyramid, but the force has not yet been identified. Yes, 1977, Australian Women's Weekly. Okay. However, we know this free energy can dehydrate food, make yogurt, preserve cut flowers and herbs, reduce plant growing time, keep razor blades sharp, help house plants grow faster and stronger, chemically change water, energize aluminium, and make medication easier and more effective. The amazing power of pyramids has been tested and proved under laboratory conditions using an exact scale model of the Cheops Pyramid in Egypt. You can also get the same results by putting a pyramid to work for you. Ooh. Recent scientific interest in the power of pyramids began when a Frenchman, M. Bovie, entered Cheops Pyramid some years ago and found dead animals in the king's chamber which had not decayed but had instead dehydrated and mummified. Believing that the shape of the pyramid might have significance, he built a small-scale model and placed a dead cat in it about 1/3 the distance from the base to the apex, at the king's chamber level. The cat mummified. Really? Explorations over thousands of years have established that there are a number of rooms within the Great Pyramid, but the electrical force seems greatest at the king's chamber. This room is below the apex, roughly 1/3 the distance up from the base to the apex. It is a bare room, 9 meters, 30 feet long, 5 meters, 17 feet wide, by 6 meters, 19 feet high, containing only a lidless sarcophagus, a rectangular stone coffin. Cheops Pyramid is the 7th wonder of the ancient world and the tallest of many pyramids. Located about 16 kilometers west of Cairo, it contains over 2.5 million blocks of limestone and granite. And this is a lengthy article, so we'll just skip a little bit here where it talks about the dimensions. And we pick it up where it says, one way by which we can establish that an electrical force exists within a pyramid is by an experiment using a small pyramid. This must, of course, be an exact scale model of the Cheops, aligned to true north and away from electrical disturbances. Didn't we read earlier on that it should be aligned to magnetic north? If a steel needle attached to a thread is held over the apex, it will slowly start to swing around the apex in a circular motion, which will then turn in an oval path and finally swing back and forth as a pendulum over the true north-south line. And breaking here for a moment to say this, of course, describes the ideomotor action when it comes to swinging pendulums. Now very well understood. No mystery there, simply a psychological effect. We pick it up. The distance of the swing varies greatly depending on the person holding the thread. If the needle swings on a 1-inch arc for the person holding the thread, and another person for whom the needle will swing over a 3-inch arc puts a hand on the person holding the thread, the needle will increase its swing. Sounds very scientific. The only conclusion we come to is that there must be some connection between the electrical system of the person's body and that of the force within the pyramid. 1977. Cosmetic uses. They say that pictures don't lie, so here's more proof, above left, that an electrical force exists within the pyramid. Kirlian photography, which we've examined on a previous trove, Kirlian photography has now given us a tool to establish conclusively that pyramid energy is not restricted to the confines of the inside of the pyramid alone, but in effect radiates from it as well. Perhaps this is the reason that it is not considered safe to operate aircraft in the vicinity of the pyramids, because numerous instrument malfunctions have been reported by pilots. Oh dear, I hope they take more care. What can a pyramid do? The energy force within a pyramid can do many things, some of which are as follows. 1. Meditation is far easier inside a pyramid for many people. The benefits are better physical and mental health and improved material well-being. 2. Dehydration of vegetables and fruits, such as asparagus, beets, carrots, onions and onion greens, corn, peas, peppers, beans, mushrooms, apples, pears, and peaches. 3. Dehydration of meat, such as beef, venison, and fish. 4. Transferring pyramid energy to water for medicinal and cosmetic uses. 5. Transferring pyramid energy to aluminium for a dozen household purposes, just like the ancient Egyptians. 6. Making yogurt in the pyramid. 7. Germinating seedlings and growing plants in the pyramid. Is there anything you can't do in the pyramid? 8. Mellowing wine in the pyramid. 9. Mellowing tobacco in the pyramid, such as pipe tobacco, cigarettes, and cigars. Well, that's okay. If you're in the pyramid doing that, I'm sure you'll get better health anyway. 10. Sharpening razor blades in the pyramid for dozens of extra shaves. Always align the razor blade with the north-south axis of the pyramid, just like the ancient Egyptians. Now, the rest of this report here talks about building a pyramid, much like the other article. It gives you dimensions and how to cut those out and put it together. And it talks about exactly how to align it depending on where you are in Australia. But we pick it up a bit later on where it says, pyramids for meditation. The pyramid seems to enhance meditation for many people. It has been found that the best location in the pyramid for meditation is at the location of the king's chamber below the apex. The meditator may assume either a lying down or sitting position. In either case, the body should be aligned to the true north line. Energize water. The energy found in the pyramid can be transferred simply by storing water in the king's chamber. It is important to remember that your pyramid should be of sufficient size so that what is put in does not exceed about 5% of the total volume. I wonder how you figured that out. There are many uses for energized water where it excels over plain tap water. When pyramid water is used on houseplants, the growth rate is substantially increased and the color greatly intensified. Women friends swear that using energized water as a face wash has a beneficial effect on the complexion, and as a hair rinse, it brings out the highlights. We use pyramid water for drinking and feel that the taste is better than ordinary untreated water. This applies to making coffee, tea, and all sorts of drinks as well. And it goes on with other benefits, but we'll curtail this and just get to the end of the story. And again, I will add a link to this in the show notes. This very item. Normally, I just add a link to the trove generally, but I'll add an exact link to this item. You might want to read the rest of it. You can use free energy as an easy, economical way, that would be very economical, of dehydrating fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, and poultry without artificial additives. If the following simple directions for dehydrating in a pyramid are carefully followed, the foods should be nutritious, economical, free of unwanted bacteria, and the flavors considerably enhanced. The trays used for dehydration of foods should be made of aluminium, energized, or non-metallic screening tightly stretched over a frame of wood and raised within 1-inch legs to allow for adequate circulation of air. In dehydrating food, utmost care should be taken to see that conditions are clean from start to finish. Wash hands often with soap and water. Don't handle food if you have sores on your face, hands, or arms. Good advice at last. Keep table counters, cutting surfaces, knives, and other equipment scrupulously clean. Shield food from insects. The safe maximum percentage of water to leave in home-dried procedure are no more than 5% for vegetables and no more than 20% for fruit. Always check dehydrated food, particularly meat and other proteins, both before and after storage, to be certain there is no mold or infestation, no off odor, and no rancidity. Any food that shows any of these properties should be immediately discarded. Well, there you go. What great advice from 1977 in the Australian Women's Weekly magazine. And think that this sort of thing was actually taken seriously at the time. I guess maybe the editor of the magazine at the time thought it was worth filling up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. And as I keep saying, 1977, people were into all sorts of interesting things. And you too can be into all sorts of interesting things when you go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au and learn how to make a pyramid. Or maybe you just want to have better tasting water, whatever the case. Because at Trove, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and I did enjoy my barbecue. Now, for those people expecting to hear an interview with Ben Radford this week and part 2 of last week's Book of Tim, I've had to juggle the segments around a little lately. So those 2 segments, the interview with Ben Radford and part 2 of the Book of Tim, where he talks about perpetual motion, that will be on next week's show. So stay tuned or tune in for episode number 722 on the 7th of August for those segments. Also coming up next week on the Trove segment, we look at the day the city of Adelaide wasn't washed away by a tsunami in 1976. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal, or the occasional donation. It means that you people who do continue to support the show get to hear the show, but your generous donations means that everybody else gets to enjoy the show too. So thank you very much indeed. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to skepticzone.tv, click the subscriptions link. It's quite obvious on the page, and you too can help support the Skeptic Zone. Also at that page, you'll find the show notes for every episode. You can listen to the show right off that page itself. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see things like the Solar Flare adventure, my origami prints for sale, and a link to the Vaccination Chronicles documentary. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
I hope that this was well read. Ouch, that hurt my head. I think it's too loud. Maybe this is better.
Anyway, Richard, I'm done.